All right, so this past weekend, the problem child struck again in a fight that a lot of people thought would be very competitive, but ultimately ended up being more of the same. Now, I usually make prediction videos before most big fights, but I didn't for this past one. It was really kind of hard to even muster up the motivation to do so because this fight was always, in my mind, going to be just like the majority of fights from Jake Paul, where the sheer amount of advantages that he's stacked in his favor did and were always going to make this not very competitive.
First of all, Jake Paul, he was supposed to fight Mike Tyson. Then the date got pushed back because Mike Tyson had the medical emergency.
Back is broken, spinal.
And now there is a new date set with a new opponent. Mike Perry versus Jake Paul will go down. Jake Paul is rolling the dice here. He's grown a set of balls. He's taking on a man that is in his fighting prime.
Here we have Mike Bisping giving his thoughts. I couldn't find the exact clip, but I know that he previously has made a prediction that this was going to be the one. This was going to be the MMA guy to stop Jake Paul. And as we now know, he was very much wrong about that. And sure, I could go off and find examples of a lot of people, especially in the MMA world, that had a favorable prediction for this fight. They thought Mike Perry was going to make the fight ugly and dirty and get in Jake's face and maybe cause him real damage, which at certain parts of the fight, he was able to do. But ultimately, I think a lot of people going into this one just fully did not grasp how many things were not working in Mike Perry's favor. Right here, we have the tail of the tape where Jake Paul is 27 years old and Mike Perry's 32. And in that regard, I have to say, Bisping was right. He is fighting someone who is in his fighting prime. I mean, 32 is, for most sports, that's right around smack dab in the middle of your athletic prime. But then the further you dig into this one, you look at the height difference. I don't think Jake's actually 6'1". When you see him face off against Tommy Fury, who's listed at 6 feet tall, he's a little bit shorter than him. So even if he is closer to 5'11", I don't think Mike Perry's all that much of a legit 5'10", so it all kind of evens out. And then now we get to the real big differences between the two. We see Jake weighing in at 200 pounds, Mike weighing in at 196.6, but I think it's important to note that Mike Perry, upon weighing in, only really had to just go ahead and take off his shirt, and he weighed in way under the limit at 196. And then here you see Jake Paul looking visibly drained, looks like he's low on energy, initially did not make the weight, brought out the towel, had to get completely and totally naked, and according to the commission, weighed in at exactly 200 pounds. And when you see how much weight he put on in preparation for that Mike Tyson fight that's unfortunately still going to happen, it's really no wonder that he struggled making 200 pounds when he was reportedly walking around closer to 230. And Mike Perry, who started his fighting career at 155 pounds. And to be fair, he spent the bulk of his career at the higher level in the UFC, fighting at 170. But for anyone out there that actually watched Mike Perry's career in the UFC, you would know that closer to the end of his career, he was getting outboxed by guys that were boxing heavy MMA fighters at 170 pounds. And to be fair to Jake, he didn't just win because he was the bigger guy. He won because he was by far, clearly and obviously, the more technically skilled, the more technically proficient boxer of the two. And you can see from as early as the first knockdown in the fight that Mike Perry didn't just go down because he was hurt by Jake's insane, devastating power. He just doesn't have good footwork and good balance. He doesn't have the ability to stay on his feet the way that a higher level boxer would. And Perry actually did have some success constantly applying the pressure, and he was able to find some counters against Jake, putting Jake on the back foot. And Jake did get hurt a couple times in this one. I don't think he was ever in danger of getting stopped, but I think that you kind of see the blueprint of a way. I mean, obviously there's multiple ways. We see Tommy Fury was able to dismantle him, but another way that a guy who's not super high level technically can beat him by constantly applying pressure, hitting him with counters. And I think maybe a more powerful and a bigger puncher than a Mike Perry could have turned this fight around. But unfortunately, Perry being significantly smaller and Perry having such a glaring hole in his game, being that lack of head movement, kind of just got pieced up in there, especially in the later rounds. And then we see here with that last knockdown that it was just about over. And not to sound like a hater, but I think that one thing that kind of shocks some people when they look at not just this fight, but some of Jake's more recent performances in juxtaposition to that insane knockout of Woodley is that Jake has not been able to stop some of the guys he's been fighting lately, even though they are MMA fighters that don't display a great amount of head movement and have taken entire UFC careers worth of blows to the head. I think when Jake first came on the scene, that giant knockout of Nate Robinson, who in hindsight was a smaller guy who was not a boxer by any means, but then you see the way that he flatlined Tyron Woodley and the fact that he has, in fact, knocked down all of his opponents up to this point. But that narrative of him being some YouTuber that just found out by going to the gym that he happens to have this insane knockout power is not proving to be true at all. I think he hits reasonably hard for someone his size, but I don't think he has any kind of extreme special knockout power. And if you look at the moments in this fight, you'll see that he really, in my opinion, I don't see any notable things to point at to say that he's progressed all that much ever since that Nate Diaz fight, or maybe even going as far back as the Anderson Silva fight. He still shows a lack of high-level footwork. He, of course, had significantly better footwork than Mike Perry, but he still crosses his feet. He still wings the overhand right while either looking down, closing his eyes, or both, just kind of hoping that it lands. And multiple moments in this fight, he got countered by a guy who isn't all that technical of a fighter. So I know I sound like a giant hater right now, but I think I'm just kind of being honest. I don't know if I've seen all that much progression from Jake. And as someone who has done videos and breakdowns of multiple of his fights at this point, I legitimately expected, even though I don't think he's all that great of a boxer, I don't think he has an insanely high ceiling, I still thought he would look better at this point, considering the fact that his first boxing match that he's ever had was back in 2018. And now that we're more than halfway done with 2024, I thought he would be on a level where he would look a lot more sharp, a lot more technically sound, especially because he's reportedly devoted every waking moment of his life to boxing. I think that's the big takeaway I have of this fight. More of the same. What we saw in terms of what he was able to do was stop a guy smaller than him, which still, Mike Perry's a tough guy. Mike Perry might not be a boxer, might not have been, a high-level title contender in MMA, but the guy can fight. He's able to knock out a guy who can fight but not box, but we already knew that. And of course, we have to mention the fact that he called out Alex Pereira, of all people, right after the fight. Here's the video of him on a FaceTime call with Alex Pereira, and the thing that he continues to say to Alex is, "Will Dana let you out?" Which, again, is the same thing he did a few years ago when he was calling out Conor McGregor, calling out a big-name, multiple division champion in the UFC, knowing that they are locked in a contract that legally will not allow him to fight you. I've given a lot of predictions on a lot of Jake Paul fights. Alex Pereira knocks him out, plain and simple. Alex being somebody who is a bit older at 36, 37 years old, who doesn't have great boxing fundamentals, contrary to, what a lot of people might think, since he's a kickboxer. He leaves his hands down. He stands really straight up, but he has so much power, so much of a reach, height advantage. I think all those things come into play, and I think he stops Jake. But none of that matters because it's never going to happen. And again, like I said before, with Jake, it's just more of the same. I can't honestly say I'm all that impressed with what I saw in the ring or on the microphone right out of the ring. Conor McGregor, being a prominent really owner of BKFC, definitely had his attention on this fight, but I think that not enough people are giving attention to the scathing tweet that he released immediately after this fight, going on to call Jake Paul a piss bag, using insults that only the Irish could think of, bringing up the giant weight difference between Jake Paul and Mike Perry, but I think more importantly, saying that he's juiced out of his mind, and being one of the first people to bring up a very interesting point that I've been thinking about a while that kind of gives some credence to some of those theories about him being on performance-enhancing drugs. He goes on to say Nikisa, Jake's manager and the former, I think, CFO of the UFC, he says he should take him to Vegas. Oh, that's right. You could never. The Athletic Commission testing, real fighting. And if you know anything about the Nevada State Athletic Commission, you know it's one of the best in the business for a lot of reasons. The Nevada State Athletic Commission was, I believe, the first to ban TRT in sports in general, let alone combat sports. And if you really take a second to think back about all the different fights that Jake Paul has had, think about where they tend to happen. He fought in the Middle East. He's fought in Florida. He's fought in Texas. He's fought in Arizona. But you'd think that if he really is falling in love with boxing the way he says he is, and if he wants to fight a big name like Mike Tyson, you got to wonder, if he's all about the money, why would he not want to fight in one of the best markets in the history of combat sports, Las Vegas? Again, I'm pretty surprised that no major outlet has kind of dug into this, because if you really plot it out and you think about how logical it would be for someone like him to fight, especially someone like Mike Tyson, in Las Vegas, and if they went to a football arena, then they have Raiders Stadium, the Death Star, which is perfect. At least for me personally, when I really try to think about what could be the reasoning behind why they would want to skip out on such a good market, the only answer that I can come up with is that they don't want to deal with the commission. And then, of course, that brings up the question of how and why the presence of VADA testing has been so contentious in a lot of Jake Paul's very public negotiations with other fighters, such as the Tommy Furies of the world. So there you have it, another Jake Paul fight going exactly how you would expect. Unfortunately, it looks like the next guy on the list still is a 58-year-old Mike Tyson. If I'm being honest, I'm really hoping that fight just plain does not happen. When you put two and two together, Jake being so much younger, faster, being active, and potentially being on performance-enhancing drugs, the idea of him knocking out a damn near 60-year-old boxing legend is just disgusting. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Did you guys enjoy this fight? Did you watch this fight? Did you even know this fight was going on? And how do you feel about this fight against him versus Mike Tyson still apparently going ahead? And maybe more importantly, now that someone's finally kind of said something about this piece of evidence suggesting that Jake might actually be on performance-enhancing drugs, let me know down below what you guys think of this. Thanks for watching.